It was a busy morning at the airport. People rushed in every direction, some dragging big suitcases, some sipping coffee, some talking on phones. Everyone looked like they had somewhere important to be. But in the middle of all that noise, at gate 14, sat a little girl. She was about 10 years old. Her skin was deep brown, her hair neatly tied into 2 puffs. She wore a clean yellow dress and white shoes. In her small hands, she held a soft, old teddy bear. She looked nervous. Her legs didn't touch the floor, so they swung slowly from the airport chair. She glanced at the big screen that showed flight numbers, then back at the boarding gate. She was flying alone. People look, people judge. Some passengers noticed her, but not with kindness. A tall man in a business suit looked at her, then at his wife, and whispered, "Where are her parents?" Another woman frowned. "I hope she's not on our flight." Nobody sat near her. People avoided eye contact. She pulled her teddy closer and looked at the floor. The flight crew notices. 2 flight attendants stood at a distance. One of them, a young blonde woman named Lisa, looked over at the girl. Lisa leaned toward her coworker and whispered, "Is she flying alone?" The other, an older woman named Monica, glanced at her and replied, "Looks like it." Lisa rolled her eyes and said, "Why would anyone let such a young girl fly alone? Do people not care anymore?" They didn't know her story. They didn't ask. They just judged. The little girl tries to be brave. The girl checked her small backpack again. Inside was a water bottle, a book, and a letter with a shiny gold stamp. She looked at it for a moment, then zipped the bag shut again. She sat up straight and whispered to her teddy, "We'll be okay. Daddy will be waiting." Her voice was small, but her words were full of hope. The gate announcement, Flight 729 to New York, is now boarding first class, a voice said over the speaker. The little girl looked down at her ticket. First class. She stood up slowly and walked toward the gate. As she reached the line, the same flight attendants noticed her. Lisa frowned. "Sweetheart, this line is for first class." The girl handed her the ticket. Monica looked at it, confused. Lisa said, "Did someone give you the wrong ticket, honey? This is first class. Maybe you're flying with a group." The girl shook her head softly. "No, ma'am. My dad booked it." Lisa forced a smile. "Okay, just wait here one moment." She took the ticket and walked to the side, whispering again to Monica, "This must be a mistake. That seat costs more than most people make in a month." Left waiting. The girl stood quietly, alone again, holding her teddy. Passengers behind her began to complain. "Why is the line stopped? Is there a problem?" A man from the back asked, "Why is that girl up here? Isn't she too young to fly solo?" Lisa returned and said, "Sorry for the delay, folks. We're just clearing something up." She didn't look at the girl. The girl looked down. A woman notices. An older woman in a green sari, standing in the first-class line, saw what was happening. She stepped forward and said gently, "Excuse me, is there a problem with the child's seat?" Lisa replied quickly, "It's just being checked." The woman turned to the girl and asked kindly, "Are you all right, Beta?" The girl nodded, but her eyes were wet. The woman gave her a smile, a real one. But Lisa pulled her aside and whispered, "Please don't interfere." Time moves slowly. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The gate kept boarding. People walked past her. Nobody said a word. The little girl just stood there, quiet, waiting, hurt. The hidden truth. Behind the scenes, Lisa showed the ticket to the supervisor and said, "She's a child. This has to be wrong." The supervisor checked the system. His eyes went wide. "Do you know who booked this?" he whispered. Lisa frowned. "No." The man looked shocked. "Her father owns the airline." The final boarding call for Flight 729 echoed through the airport. "All remaining first-class passengers, please proceed to Gate 14. Most passengers were already on the plane. Only a few stood at the gate. The little black girl stood among them, holding her teddy bear close to her chest. Her eyes stayed fixed on the gate door. Her hands were shaking. She knew this wasn't going well. The looks, the whispers. Lisa, the young flight attendant, glanced at the girl again and sighed. "I can't believe this is still happening," she whispered to Monica. "She's just a child," Monica said. "Let's just check her seat and let her board." Lisa crossed her arms. "First class. Dressed like that. Alone. I'm not buying it." They walked over to her again. "Sweetheart," Lisa said, trying to sound kind but with a fake smile, "are you sure someone didn't give you this ticket by mistake?" The girl nodded softly. "My daddy gave it to me," she whispered. Lisa raised her eyebrows. "Is your daddy meeting you in New York?" "No. He's already there. I'm going to him." Lisa gave Monica a look. Monica said nothing. "The seat check." Lisa leaned down. "Let me take a quick look at that ticket again, okay?" The girl handed it to her carefully, as if it was her most precious thing. Lisa checked the seat, 1A, first class. The most expensive seat on the plane. She forced another smile. "Just wait here one more moment, honey." Lisa turned and walked back to the gate desk. Monica followed. Passengers stared again. Some whispered. A teenage boy laughed under his breath. Someone said loudly, "She probably found that ticket in the trash." The girl heard. Her heart sank. She clutched her teddy bear tighter and looked at the floor. No one stood up. No one stepped in. Not the passengers. Not the flight crew. Not even Monica, who seemed unsure but stayed quiet. The girl had been standing for almost 30 minutes now. Her legs were tired. Her eyes were full of questions she didn't know how to ask. Lisa makes a choice. Lisa returned with the ticket in her hand. "I've spoken to our supervisor," she said, pretending to be gentle, "and there's still a little confusion. So for now, we're going to ask you to sit in a seat at the back of the plane. Just until we sort this out, okay?" The girl didn't answer. She just nodded slowly. She followed Lisa down the jet bridge, walking behind the other passengers, the last one to board. Row 32, the last seat. Lisa walked her all the way to the back. Row 32, near the bathroom. The plane smelled like strong cleaner and noise filled the air. Babies were crying. People were arguing over space in the overhead bin. Lisa pointed to a middle seat squished between two strangers. "You can sit here for now," she said. The girl looked around. Her teddy bear didn't feel safe anymore. She sat down slowly. The man beside her didn't look at her. The woman on the other side gave her a tight smile and then turned away. The moment that broke her, the plane began to move. She looked out the small round window. She blinked back tears. Her seat was supposed to be big, with a blanket and a screen. She was supposed to get juice. She was supposed to feel important, just like her daddy promised. But now, she felt invisible, unwanted, like nothing. A kind stranger notices. Just before takeoff, the woman in the green sari from the airport came down the aisle looking for space for her bag. She stopped when she saw the little girl in row 32. Her eyes widened. "Why are you sitting here, child? I thought you had a first-class seat." The girl opened her mouth, but no words came. Lisa came up behind them quickly. "It's fine, ma'am. We're handling it." The older woman stared at her. "You mean you moved a child with a first-class ticket to the back? Why?" Lisa's smile faded. "It's under review." "Really?" the woman asked. "Or did you not believe she belonged up front?" Silence. Passengers nearby started to listen. But Lisa didn't reply. One message sent. The woman sat down, shaking her head. The girl finally took out her small phone and typed a message with trembling fingers. She sent it to just one person. "They moved me to the back. They didn't believe me." She hit send. And then she waited. The flight was now in the air. The engines roared softly, and the plane flew smoothly above the clouds. But for one little girl sitting near the toilet in row 32, the journey was not smooth at all. She sat with her teddy bear on her lap, looking out the tiny window. Nobody around her smiled. Nobody around her asked if she was okay. She was supposed to be sitting in seat 1A, in first class. But the crew didn't believe she belonged there. A seat that was hers. Seat 1A was large, soft, and clean. It had extra space, a TV screen, and a glass of orange juice already waiting. It was empty. It had her name on it. But someone else sat there now, a man in a fancy suit who got a free upgrade. He leaned back and smiled, not knowing the seat was already bought by a father who trusted this airline with his child. Not knowing that this seat was refused to a little girl, just because of how she looked. A sad passenger. In row 32, the little girl felt a deep sadness. Her name was Hope. Her daddy named her that because he believed she would bring light wherever she went. But in that moment, she felt like no one saw her. She remembered how excited she had been that morning. First class, her daddy had said on the phone, "Because you deserve the best." He had made sure everything was ready, from her ticket to her meal. But now she was sitting in a tight seat, between strangers, with people pushing past her to use the toilet. The crew talks behind her back. In the galley, Lisa and Monica whispered again. "I still don't get it," Lisa said. "That ticket had to be fake." Monica shook her head. The system said it was real. And the name on it. It matched. Lisa rolled her eyes. Then how did a kid like her get it? Monica didn't answer. She was starting to feel something. Guilt. The woman in the green sari, a few rows ahead, the woman who had spoken up at the gate, sat quietly. She kept looking back toward Hope. She didn't like what she had seen. She didn't like the way Lisa had spoken to the child. She didn't like the way passengers had laughed at her. And she especially didn't like that no one had apologized. A message reaches the sky. Far away, in a glass building in New York City, a tall man in a dark suit stood up from his chair. He had just read a message on his phone from his daughter. "They moved me to the back. They didn't believe me." His name was Alexander Reed, a quiet man with a strong heart. He was the CEO of Reed Airways, the airline his daughter was now flying on. The airline whose staff had just insulted his daughter. He looked at his assistant and said, "Tell them to land that plane. I'm going there myself. Trouble is coming." Back on the flight, Monica's walkie-talkie beeped. "Cabin crew, please report to the cockpit." She walked quickly to the front. A minute later, Lisa was called too. The pilot looked at them and said with a serious voice, "We've been asked to land at the nearest airport. There's an emergency." Lisa blinked. What emergency? The captain didn't answer, but his face showed worry. Very real worry. A shocking realization. Monica asked, "What does this have to do with the girl?" The captain hesitated. Then he said slowly, "That child in the back. She's not just any passenger." Lisa frowned. "She's the daughter of Alexander Reed." Lisa's mouth opened. Monica gasped. "The Alexander Reed. The owner?" The captain nodded. "And he's waiting for us at the next airport." Hook ending. The seat they refused. Back in row 32, Hope stared at the seat in front of her. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She just waited, quietly. She didn't know that outside the window, another plane was already flying. A private jet. And inside that jet was her father, flying toward her. Not as a businessman, not as a billionaire, but as a father ready to fight for his daughter's dignity. Hope sat still in row 32, her head leaning gently against the window. The clouds outside floated softly by, but her thoughts were not soft. She was thinking about her father. She was thinking about how he always kept his promises. He had promised her first class. He had promised she would be treated with care. But right now, she felt forgotten. She didn't know that everything was about to change. Because far away, A phone call had just been made. The CEO makes his move. Alexander Reed stood in his office, calm but serious. He had built Reed Airways from nothing. He was a man of quiet power. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. But when his daughter messaged him about what happened, something inside him changed. He picked up the phone and called the head of operations. His voice was cold and steady. "There's a flight in the air. 729 to New York," he said. "There's a little girl on board. Seat 1A. The man on the phone replied, "Yes, sir. She's my daughter. And she's not in that seat." Silence. "Land the plane. I'm going to fix this myself." Emergency instructions. In the cockpit of Flight 729, the pilot received a message from airline headquarters. It was short and clear. "Priority landing approved. Nearest airport instructed. Do not delay." The pilot turned to his co-pilot and said, "This has never happened before." Monica, one of the flight attendants, stood behind them and asked quietly, "What's going on?" The captain looked at her. "Get ready," he said. "We've upset the wrong person." Lisa begins to panic. Back in the galley, Lisa was starting to sweat. She paced nervously. "I didn't know who she was," she said to Monica. Monica replied calmly, "You didn't need to know. You just needed to treat her with respect." Lisa crossed her arms. She didn't look like a first-class passenger. She was alone. She didn't say much. "That's no excuse," Monica said. Then she added, "Do you realize what you've done?" Lisa's face turned pale. Passengers start to notice. The plane started to descend. People looked around, confused. A man asked, "We're landing already. We're not near New York." Another said, "Is there a problem with the plane?" A mother held her baby closer. "Is it safe?" No one had answers. No one knew that Hope, the quiet little girl in row 32, was the reason everything had changed. And still, she said nothing. The woman in green speaks again. The older woman in the green sari walked to the back. She kneeled next to Hope's seat and whispered, "Are you okay, child?" Hope nodded, but the woman saw her eyes. They were tired, lost. She reached into her handbag and gave her a sweet wrapped in golden paper. "Have this," she said gently. "Sometimes a little sugar helps the heart." Hope smiled for the first time. A small, shy smile. Lisa's fear grows. Lisa was now shaking. "What's going to happen to me?" she asked Monica. Monica replied, "I don't know, but I think you're about to meet the boss." Lisa covered her face with her hands. "I thought she was just another kid." A special landing. The plane touched down at a quiet airport. No one knew where they were. Passengers looked out the windows and gasped. There were black cars waiting on the runway. Security guards, news cameras, and one man in a black coat standing still with his hands behind his back. It was Alexander Reed, Hope's father. Hope looks up. Hope heard the landing sound. She peeked out the window and saw the cars. She didn't understand what was happening. But something told her. Daddy was here. She held her teddy bear tighter and waited. The plane had landed. The engines were quiet now. But inside Flight 729, the tension was louder than ever. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. All eyes were on the man in the black coat. He had just stepped into the aircraft. Tall, calm, and serious. Alexander Reed, CEO of Reed Airways, father of the girl in row 32. The crew didn't expect him to come. The passengers didn't expect him to care. But he was here. Not as a boss. Not as a billionaire. But as a father. And every step he took was full of purpose. Silence in the air. The pilot stood near the cockpit door, sweating. Monica stood frozen, unsure what to say. Lisa lowered her eyes. Her face had lost all color. She clutched her hands, wishing this was a dream. Passengers whispered, "Is that really him?" "That's Alexander Reed." What's he doing on the plane? A baby cried somewhere, but no one paid attention. All eyes followed the walk. Slow steps, strong heart. Alexander Reed began to walk down the aisle, one row at a time. He didn't rush. He didn't look left or right. He was walking toward someone, toward the one person who mattered more than the entire airline. His daughter. Every passenger leaned away slightly as he passed. Some even held their breath. They felt like something important was happening, like justice itself was walking past them. Hope sees him. In row 32, Hope sat still, hugging her teddy bear. She heard the steps. She looked up, and when she saw him, her eyes filled with tears, but not sad ones. Tears of relief. Tears that said, "Daddy came." She stood up, but didn't run. She just waited, because she knew her father would come to her. He always did. A quiet hug. Alexander reached row 32. He didn't say anything. He didn't yell. He simply knelt down, right there in the narrow aisle. And he opened his arms. Hope dropped her teddy bear and stepped into them. She hugged him tightly. He held her like he was holding the whole world. The passengers watched in silence. Some smiled. Some cried. Even the woman in the green sari placed a hand over her heart. The first words. Alexander whispered into his daughter's ear. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Hope shook her head. "It's okay," she whispered back. "I knew you'd come." He kissed the top of her head and stood up. Then slowly, he turned around. Eyes on Lisa. Lisa was standing near the galley. Her knees felt weak. Her voice was stuck in her throat. Alexander looked at her, calm but cold. "You moved, my daughter." Lisa tried to speak. "Sir," we didn't know who she was. Alexander didn't blink. "That's the problem." Lisa stuttered. We didn't mean harm. We just thought." "You thought she didn't belong in first class," he finished for her. The cabin went dead silent. Lisa had no answer. The speech everyone heard. Alexander turned slightly, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "This airline was built on respect," he said. "On trust. On dignity." He pointed toward row 1. "My daughter's seat was 1A. She had a real ticket, a real name. She didn't need to look rich or dress rich. She only needed to be treated like a person." People began nodding. The woman in green whispered, "Finally." The passengers react. One by one, passengers started clapping. Not loudly, not like at a show, but slow, soft claps. Claps of respect. A mother smiled at her child. A teenage boy looked down, ashamed. Even Monica clapped once, quietly. Lisa stood frozen, eyes wet, no words left. A promise made. Alexander turned back to Hope. "Come," he said. He held out his hand. Hope took it. Together, they walked down the aisle, back toward the front. Every step they took now felt powerful. The same aisle that once felt like a path of shame now became a path of pride. The airplane cabin was still. No engine noise, no movement, just silence and tension. Hope sat quietly in seat 1A, her teddy bear safely back in her arms. Her father, Alexander Reed, stood tall in the aisle, his face calm, but full of fire. He had said it clearly. "Now let's talk about who made this happen." And now, everyone waited. Some were scared. Some were ashamed. Some were ready for justice. Lisa tries to hide. Lisa was standing behind the galley curtain, heart pounding in her chest. She was hoping, praying, that somehow this would go away. But it didn't, because Alexander looked straight at her. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Come here." Lisa stepped forward, trembling. Every eye followed her. Every step felt heavy. She had never been so small in her life. The final questions. Alexander kept his voice low but sharp. "Did you check the boarding pass?" Lisa nodded. Yes, but did the name match? Yes. Was there any mistake? Lisa shook her head. No, sir. But I thought. That's the problem, he said coldly. You thought. He looked around at the passengers. You judged her by her skin, by her clothes, by her silence. Lisa's eyes welled with tears. I didn't mean. But you did it anyway. The crew divides. Monica stepped forward. She stood between Alexander and Lisa. She was wrong, Monica said quietly. I knew it too, but I didn't stop it. Alexander looked at her. Why not? Monica lowered her head. I was scared. I didn't want trouble. Alexander sighed. He didn't hate Monica. She had shown regret. But fear had let injustice win. And that still mattered. A note is taken. One of Alexander's assistants, who had just entered the plane from outside, was taking notes. Every word, every name, every detail. This wasn't just about one seat anymore. This was going to become something much bigger. The passengers speak. An older man stood up. I watched what happened at the gate. No one spoke up. We all failed her. A woman added, she's just a child. And we all looked the other way. The man in the suit, the one who was sitting in Hope's original seat, slowly stood too. I took her seat, he said. I didn't question it. I'm sorry. He looked toward Hope. I didn't deserve it. A father's stand. Alexander turned back to his daughter. She was watching him with wide, quiet eyes. He knew she didn't want revenge. She wanted respect. He knelt beside her again. Sometimes people forget who you are, he said softly. But never forget who you are. Hope nodded slowly. I'm your daughter. He smiled. Yes, and that means you don't let anyone make you feel small. Action begins. Alexander stood again and faced the crew. Lisa, he said, your career here is over. She gasped. Tears rolled down her face. I'm sorry, she said. Please, I'll do anything. This is not punishment, he said. It's protection. For every child who steps on this plane after today. Then he turned to Monica. You failed too. But you owned it. He paused. You'll stay, but you'll be retrained. Fully. From the ground up. Monica whispered, thank you, sir. A promise to everyone. Alexander looked around the cabin again. This won't happen again, he said firmly. Not on my airline. Not on my watch. The passengers nodded. One woman started clapping. Then another. Soon, the whole cabin was full of slow, strong applause. Not for power. Not for money. But for truth. For dignity. For a little girl who said nothing, but changed everything. The plane rises again. The emergency stop was complete. The plane took off once more, now headed to its original destination. But this wasn't the same flight anymore. It was a different journey now. The little girl sat proudly in her seat. A father sat beside her, holding her hand. And the entire crew walked differently now. With more care. With more respect. With more eyes opened. The sun was setting as Flight 729 finally landed in New York City. The sky was golden, but inside the airport, things were far from calm. News vans were lined up outside. Cameras, microphones, flashing lights. Reporters stood ready. Something big had happened in the air, and now the whole world wanted to know. The VIP exit. The plane taxied to a private corner of the airport, away from the usual gates. Special stairs were rolled to the door. The crew opened the exit carefully. Then the cameras started clicking. People didn't know exactly what to expect, but what they saw next stunned them. The girl who changed everything. Hope stepped out first. She wasn't wearing a crown. She wasn't in designer clothes. She wore the same simple dress, still holding her teddy bear. Still just a little girl. But to the world, she now looked like something more. She looked like a symbol. of quiet strength, of grace under pain, of dignity that no one could steal. Her father behind her walked Alexander Reed. Serious, protective, not smiling for the cameras, but focused only on his daughter. He didn't wave. He didn't talk. But everyone felt it. This wasn't a CEO moment. This was a father's moment. And the world respected it. The questions begin. Reporters rushed in as close as they could. Mr. Reed, is it true your daughter was removed from first class? Was this racism? Will there be lawsuits? Do you plan to fire the entire crew? Alexander said nothing. He raised his hand, and then pointed to Hope. Ask her, he said softly. Hope speaks. The cameras turned to her. A reporter leaned forward, speaking gently. Sweetheart, what happened on that plane? Hope looked around, her teddy bear in one hand, her father's hand in the other. She spoke quietly. They moved me from my seat. I didn't know why. Were you scared? The reporter asked. She nodded. Yes, but I remembered what my dad told me. What did he say? She looked straight at the camera. He said, I belong. The crowd went silent. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment. It wasn't about the drama anymore. It was about the truth. The video goes viral. Within hours, the clip of Hope's words was everywhere, on every news channel, on every social media page. Millions of people watched it. Some cried. Some felt ashamed. Some felt inspired. The hashtag #ShitAlong started trending worldwide. People began sharing their own stories. Stories of being judged. Stories of being ignored. Stories of feeling small and learning to stand tall. Hope's story had opened a floodgate of truth. People take action. Airlines began reviewing their training programs. Teachers showed Hope's story to students in classrooms. Airports created new signs. Respect has no class. Strangers sent letters and drawings to Hope. Some said, You made me brave. I won't stay silent again. You gave me hope. Back at Reed Airways. A week later, Alexander Reed called a press conference. He stood on a stage with his daughter beside him. He looked into the cameras and said, Let me be clear, this was never about money. This is about every child, every person, who was ever made to feel like they were less. He turned to Hope. You reminded the world of something we forgot. He looked back at the crowd. She's not the future. She's the present. And we better be ready. The audience stood and clapped, not as fans, but as believers. A picture on the wall. At every Reed Airways office around the world, a new photo was placed on the wall. It showed Hope sitting in seat 1A, smiling gently, teddy bear in her lap. Below the photo, a quote, Respect isn't a gift, it's a right. Hope Reed, age 10. Weeks had passed since the flight that changed everything. But the story of Hope Reed was still being told. In newspapers, on TV, in classrooms, in homes around the world. A quiet girl with a teddy bear had become a symbol of something big. Something real. Something the world needed. A school visit. Hope stood in the front of a classroom. Kids her age looked at her with wide, curious eyes. A teacher introduced her, smiling gently. Class, this is Hope. You may have seen her on the news. Some students clapped. Others whispered, That's really her. Hope smiled nervously. She wasn't used to attention. She never asked for it. But she understood now. Her story wasn't just her own anymore. Hope's first speech. The teacher gave her a small mic. Hope took a deep breath. And then she spoke. I didn't know I was strong, she said. I was just scared, like any kid. But my dad, he reminded me that I have a name. And that name is enough. The class was silent. Even the noisy kids sat still. Hope continued. Some people are treated badly because of how they look, or how they speak, or what they wear. But I learned something. If one person speaks up, it can change things. I was that one person, but you can be too. The room exploded with applause. Letters that touched hearts. Later that week, Hope received a big box at home. Inside were hundreds of letters. Some from kids, some from grown-ups. One said, "I used to hide who I am. Now I don't." Another read, "You gave my daughter the courage to speak at school." A teacher from Brazil wrote, "We now have a Hope Day where every child tells their story." Hope read each one slowly. She didn't smile in a big, proud way. She just whispered, "Wow," and hugged her teddy bear close. A call from the world stage. One day, her father received a surprising phone call. A global education summit wanted Hope to speak. In front of thousands. Presidents, leaders, activists, teachers, children. Alexander asked her, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Hope thought for a moment, then said softly, "If I don't, who will?" The day she stood tall. The stage was huge. The room was packed. Cameras were everywhere. Hope walked slowly to the podium. She looked small, but her presence filled the space. She took a deep breath, and she spoke. Not loud, not fancy, but with truth.